So welcome to all others from around the Africa continent. My name is Bruce Wade and I'm joined with Steve Johnson, who comes to us from Rivonia, just north of Johannesburg. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you. Great. Good to have everybody with us.
So today is the first webinar of our organization, and just by way of introduction, we write that the continent of Africa, we believe, is on the brink of a new age where we'll see the power of innovation, economics and technology ripples building into waves of positive change, moving the people of Africa into a time of renewed productivity and sustainability. Sustainable Africa Strategies, or SAS as we call it, is a non-profit company based in Cape Town, South Africa, that stands within this Africa market to build that capacity. So each month, SAS will be presenting a topical webinar that'll help unpack various issues of sustainability, innovation, and technology, or anything else that comes up that is relevant. Our position is to seek truth, not to impose an argument, not to put our agenda, but to seek the truth and help create a way forward, as well as find partners who can help contribute to the various conversations and projects. And we'll introduce you to Charlotte Kemp in a moment. So we want to find people to help move projects for the better of the people of Africa. We're a non-political and apolitical organization. We don't take sides. We're also a non-geographical organization, so we're not going to take sides by borders or rivers or mountains, but we do focus on the Africa continent. And this month we're speaking about education. And our focus is, what is the future of education in South Africa? And that's a really interesting kind of concept, is that where are we? How does that look? Where are we going with this? And how do we unpack the various issues of education? So what we want to do is we want to firstly just understand that education is probably the most important factor in the long-term goal of any country within the world today. We've seen the countries that focus on education have that upper hand in all sorts of terms: technology, fiscal, innovation, et cetera, et cetera. It all goes down to education. But we've also seen some bad choices made by governments and bad choices made by education organizations and ministries that have wreaked havoc across the globe. So we just want to focus a little bit on South Africa because it's relevant and where we're going to start from. So in South Africa, we've adopted the CAP system. Apparently, I hear it was bought from Australia. And we've kind of producing a failed education model. Now, this is up for debate, but I want to take it for a point from these sort of facts, is that I say it's a failed system because literally the schooling system is producing illiterate matriculants, and not illiterate as not being able to read, but clearly illiterate as being able to operate within the associations of employment or even self-employment and entrepreneurship. So we suffer a 50% loss of pupils from grade 1 through to grade 12, and then only a minor pass rate for access into higher education, which is quite sad. Our matric results they were released this week after much debate, and they have become, if you read all the headlines in the newspapers yesterday, there's congratulating the top ones, but most prominent in the news headlines is that the matric results have become a political competition between the provinces and the different MECs of education. And they are used to manipulate political agendas, political allocation of budget, and probably bragging rights between various organizations. instead of developing our nation from the schooling upwards. So we shift the pupils to maths literacy at the slightest sign of low maths comprehension, purely because maths is not taught, and we're going to come back to that a bit later. But if you do not grasp grade 3 and 4 maths, the chances of you finishing maths at high school and matric are zero. But they found a way out. They developed maths literacy, and they push kids over there. As soon as you get into maths literacy, you are unable to go to university for most courses. We then had the wonderful idea to increase the pass rate by lowering the pass mark to 30%, allowing pupils to pass without knowing up to 70% of the work that is taught. A matric in South Africa, a passed matric, a matric with a pass rate on it, even with distinctions, is almost useless as an employment card for school leavers, and then access into higher education is almost impossible. UCT, by way of example, gets over 120,000 applications each year and are only able to accept 20% of these, and they still have a fallout rate of 40% after year one. So by way of education, introduction, that's what we have. And I want to just have this as a conversation, and I want to hand over to Steve. Steve, you can give us a little bit about your credentials, but ultimately you hold a really interesting view of skills versus qualifications in urban versus rural education. Let's hear what you've got to say.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. And yeah, congratulations on getting this very first webinar off the ground for Sustainable African Strategies. It's a milestone. Wonderful. My background's actually in wildlife management, but within that, I once asked the question of our executives in Zimbabwe, if of all the wild animals living in Zimbabwe, 40% were in the national parks and 60% were outside of the parks, who looked after the 60%? Because all the game rangers were in the parks. And it turned out that they had not really applied their minds to that, and that's part of the critical thinking that many schooling systems are deficient in, is the critical analysis of things like that. And so what happened in that instance is they challenged me to go and sort it out. And that led me to get a degree in adult education, so that we could work with the adults in the communities to look after the wildlife. And later on in my career, I expanded that into getting a master's degree in environmental education, again, working with communities primarily, but also with children. And so a lot of my work has been with communities in deep rural areas of Southern Africa, across Zimbabwe, Namibia, Botswana, Zambia, Angola. And what I have seen there, and I've been to myriads of schools, primary schools, middle schools, secondary schools, all in the name of community-based natural resource management primarily, is that the education systems of the colonial backgrounds that were forced upon our region and South Africa have failed us dismally. It took away the sustainability element, and as we hear, this is part of a sustainable African strategies, and that sustainability was taken away when education systems were forced upon the people of the colonized countries, and primarily to require them, well, firstly, so that they could control the ideology and the agenda of what was in the education system, but also the substance that was being taught was highly scientific and technical in post-industrial revolution terms, very foreign to the traditional education systems that our people in Africa had grown up with over millennia, tens of thousands of years. And there was a vacuum in that whole process, and it's never really adequately been filled across the board. And you can blame all sorts of things, apartheid and everything like that. There's a lot of those types of reasons why rural education has not been given the prominence that it should have. All of the African countries want to grow. They want to be economically viable. They want to be seen as players on the industrial circuit. And so where the rest of the world is really at the moment is in the high technology race to space. And that's leaving us in Southern Africa, in a bit of a predicament, because our basic education systems are not keeping pace with that. And seeing that the vast majority of African communities are rural communities, they don't need this high technology education that is being dumped upon them and is required of them. I was reading some statistics this morning where one of the countries requires that their children go to school through to standard 6, and that they 6 by 6, from 6 they have to attend 6 years of education, and it's primarily a Western-based education, is not considering some of the rural backgrounds. What we really need is to get to the cause, but the root cause of our people in the rural areas. Need very simple technologies and processes and systems to make sure that they can have a better life, that their well-being is improved and they can get out of the poverty trap. And that is through just honest to good, old techniques that have been sidelined. I give you an example here, is that the many of the communities in around the Victoria Falls area in Zimbabwe, Zambia, Namibia were or are arable farmers, and in very arid regions. They used to have very good techniques until new technology was forced upon them, and then they had to give up some of their old ways. We introduced conservation agriculture, which was a very simple technique of just digging a very simple hole in the ground, putting some seeds in, not a very deep hole, about 6 inches or 10 centimeters deep, putting some seeds in there with some manure and covering it with some leaves and stuff like that, and wetting it, covering the hole. And we increased the productivity using those old techniques that they'd forgotten by twice as much. In one woman increased her productivity 12-fold. Okay. So my argument here is that we've thrown out the baby with the bathwater, and we need to go back to basics in the rural areas primarily, okay, and see what works, what did work, indigenous knowledge, and try and factor that in. But there's a bridging process that needs to take place into being an industrial, technologically orientated country.
I like that. I like that perspective, and it's almost right-sizing education for the right environment. And I'm sure there'll be counter arguments to say that if person gets a, let's call it rural education, then you're handicapping them for an urban education. But I hear you, and I think it's a good conversation to have. I heard a while ago is that and this is more kind of Charlotte's area of expertise, in a dystopian future when the end of the world is near and there's been Armageddon or World War or, nuclear fallout, and everybody's living in walled cities behind big walls, and it's us and them. There are going to be two skills that are going to be required. Either you're a farmer or you're a coder. And I've always remembered that. And I was going, well, I'm pretty good at coding. I'm pretty good at technology. And so the last 5 years, I've honed my farming skills and developed a number of vegetable garden processes. So I can live on either side of the wall. Maybe just create our own wall with gardens inside. But it's just one of those things. I think it's the right education for the right type of people. And again, that famous Einstein quote that everybody tries to steal is that you can't grade everybody on the ability to climb a tree because a fish will fail. And I think it's exactly, we're trying to squeeze people into a Western society and a Western sort of way of life. So we've got these things, we educate for skills, we don't have to educate for qualifications. And speaking to employment agents, they support that because people get employed for skills, not necessarily qualifications. And in the broad matter, obviously in the professional era, you want your doctor to have a qualification, not just, I learned this on the farm. You want the airplane pilot that's flying your plane to actually be properly qualified. But for the majority of people need skills, and it's life skills that we see as not taught. In South Africa, we have life orientation, which is, and I'm going to say it because I've mentioned this a couple of times on various stages, and I've got nods from teachers and headmasters, is that life orientation is becoming a way for the teachers to get off by teaching sex ed with a bunch of teenagers. And it's sorry to say, but I think that is quite true. And people focus so much on relationship sex because it's easy, but they don't know how to, we took a group of grade 11s the other day and we were teaching them traffic rules. Okay. And the one guy said he's always wondered what these white lines are going across the road. He had never known what a zebra crossing was. And I go, it's like, I have no words for the education. And this is education in the Western Cape. So I have no words for the lack of life skills that people are walking away. But let's move on. Let's just unpack a little bit about the rise of the private school. We've seen a number of private schools arise here in South Africa. There are a number of them, and they run like corporates. And we were recently in Rwanda. And we were speaking about the education there. Now, it's interesting, in Rwanda, education is compulsory. There is no option of opting out of education. If you don't cut it in academic, they have a second stream, which they call technical school, but everybody goes to school, okay? You will finish matric in Rwanda. It is compulsory. There's no dropout allowed. And it's interesting, public school, the cost of public school every year in Rwanda is $1. $1 a year. That's how much they value education, is they will sit there and say, goodness, pay something. Give us $1, 20 Rand, okay, just under €1 for a whole year of school. But the private schools in Kigali are costing a whole whack. It's over, I can't remember the figure, but it was close to like $40,000-$50,000, which is really interesting. And we've seen that side. Is this an unfair advantage, Steve? What is happening in your point of view with private versus public education in Africa?
But there's two dynamics there. The first is the requirement for excellence. Okay, and I'm not saying that any of the public schools are not excellent. My son went to a public school and he's turned out to be highly qualified and much in demand. And he could have gone to a private school at great cost. Sure, the private schools do produce some amazing, people that can take our world forward. But many of their people as well come out just as mediocre, moderate citizens as well. And then you get in our public system a lot of good people that rise to the top and really perform. It's largely inherent in the person's drive to make themselves progress or to get better educated. I think there's a role where the private schools can access different incentive systems that will help people perform better or at a higher level. Interestingly enough, my son, who went to a public school, went to school with Elon Musk. So there's no real absolute correlation on that one. I've worked with some of the high schools and primary schools and middle schools in Alexandra and Tembisa in Johannesburg on the ground, through a process, NGO called Partners for Possibility, an amazing organization where they partner CEOs with the headmasters of schools, headmistresses of schools, and help them help fix the school, and the school teachers, the CEOs, how to communicate with communities. What is dysfunctional in a lot of the schools, urban and rural, is that at this point in time, I'm saying only at this point in time, is that a lot of corruption is taking place, and it is denying the pupils the opportunity to get better facilities. And I would say to a degree teachers, but the teachers are there, and they're very willing, and they're my heroes because they work under very arduous conditions in many instances. Some of the schools, 2,200 kids in the Tembisa school I worked with in containers, 70 kids in a classroom. It was unbelievable. It should never be allowed. So the private school, public school does have an ideological kind of connotation or a problem with it. If we worked in a perfect society where the money did get to where it was supposed to be, then I think there would be a very different picture that we are painting nowadays. What really worries me in the whole process is the access to the schooling. We have a huge unemployment rate, almost the highest in the continent in South Africa. And that youth bulge that's developing, and many of them just barely literate, and then they are becoming, they can't get jobs, they become disaffected. That creates great problems. I worked with a community in the Okavango Delta in Botswana, 1,200 people in this very, very remote village. The people were Yao people. 10 jobs existed in the community. 10 people had formal jobs. 1,190 had nothing. And the youth there, I worked with them extensively, were very disaffected. They were really, really, really champing at the bit for change. They couldn't ever see themselves getting out of it. We helped them to think through some of the solutions and options. But a lot of people don't have that privilege of being helped. And they live their lives with never actually having a formal job. And that's where the education system needs to work together with the commercial and industrial side of things to create the link between, which you quite rightly said, Bruce, is that technical side of things. The skilled trades element has been taken out of our South African system because they favor an academic qualification. Everybody is told an academic qualification at a university is better than having got an apprenticeship NTC 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what do we have now? We have a dearth of any skills in the country. People are just not stepping forward to want those jobs. They want the white collar jobs. Yeah.
And they can't get them because they're not qualified, because they got pushed to Masslet without being told what the ramifications are.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I want to just kind of maybe leap into the future here, and I want to invite Charlotte to our little stage and offer her a question that she can come and answer. So by way of introduction, Charlotte Kemp is a futurist. She's a professional speaker and the current president of the Global Speakers Federation. So she gets around a lot. And it's been able to sort of attend conferences and speaking conventions around the world, but also involved in Africa. Charlotte's also on the team of Voices into Africa, helping grow and educate speakers across Africa continent. So Charlotte, you put your futurist hat on and kind of peer over the horizon like you do and look at education. Where do we see schooling being in the future? I'll let you define the future timeline, but maybe some indications that you might have seen some of your colleagues are speaking about. Do we go back online? Do we just abandon it and plug in? Do we just forget it? I've got AI, I don't need education. Or what does that future look like? What are the trends?
All right, thank you for the easy questions. One of the biggest problems we have when we talk about anything like this is kind of like how to scale solutions. So in places around the world, there is excellent education, but it's not available for everyone. And while the promise of the internet and being online and being connected implies that anyone has access to education, the more we kind of lean into sophisticated education apps and things on computers and having, face-to-face, well, not face-to-face, but like, Zoom calls or online courses where you can see each other, that becomes more available to people with resources and, less available to people without. There are still many people in the world who do not have smartphones. They've got the old-fashioned digital phone. So it's almost like the promise is there, but the actual reality is there's a bigger and bigger and bigger divide. I loved your comment earlier when talking about the skills like farming are being lost. And since you quoted Einstein, I thought I should do that as well. So he says, I do not know with what weapons World War III will be fought, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. So there's this threat, which a lot of people feel that we're going to push our technology and our advances and the internet to a point where things collapse, and then we're going to need those practical skills. And all of a sudden, the whole world order is going to change because people who know how to farm and take care of, being in physical environments in the wild, for the rest of us, they're going to have the upper hand because they know how to do things, and the rest of us are illiterate. We're like, I don't know, environment illiterate. So we have that kind of challenge. It is really unfortunate that we painted this pseudo-American dream thing of white-collar work being more important. What we see with the States is so many people trying to pursue those tertiary educations, getting qualified, but having financial burdens of that qualification that lasts until they are retired, and the education, the certificate that they got never delivers on this promise of a great future. And American marketing is good enough that the rest of the world thinks that they should be like that as well. Africa is not America. We don't want to be like America. And there are things that we can do here that can be incredible in context. But if we kind of compare it to the gloss of an American situation or an American job or something like that, it's not going to work. Even in the States, there's lots of stories about people who go to technical school and they become plumbers or electricians. They earn a good income, they pay their bond, their kids are happy, and they don't have this burden of an education that doesn't pay off. So all of these different challenges. I'd like to offer an example of a school in Malaysia that I had a chance to visit a few years ago. So Malaysia is, as a culture, wanting their children to go into good jobs in government or corporate, which historically has been, this is where we should be going. If you got a good job, and you got a pension plan, and you got, 2 weeks off a year, you've arrived, you're safe. And that's certainly not true almost anywhere in the world. Malaysia still experiences that, but they are also aware that they need to educate their children in a different space. So this one particular school has broken all the rules. It is a school that teaches children entrepreneurial skills. So they learn all the other stuff, but they learn how to take the other stuff and make it work as an entrepreneur, as a business owner. They learn how to run a business. They learn how to create, price, market, deliver products. They have kind of collaborations between one child producing something and another child producing packaging, and they put it together and they've got a collaborative project. What was really interesting though about this is it's kind of that Eastern culture where people are expected to work really long hours. Bosses admire you if you're putting in the hours, and the headmistress of the school will walk into the teacher's lounge in the afternoon, late afternoon, and she will tell them to go home. The teachers must go home and enjoy their families, because she's challenging that cultural assumption the whole time. But the biggest thing that she did in the school that is really paying off is that the teachers who are teaching the children different things come from those specialities. They are not teachers. So she doesn't go to a teacher training school and find teachers and say, now teach this project. She goes to somebody in manufacturing, somebody in logistics, somebody in sport, an actual professional sports coach. And she hires them, brings them into the school to teach that to the children. So it's not theory, it's like real life stuff. And those kids are doing some amazing things. So 10, 11-year-old children earning enough income from their business that the school had made them set up that they can pay their private school fees themselves, not their parents. That's excellent, but it's really difficult to scale that kind of thing. It's really, we can look at that example and name the school, but to have that apply in different parts of the world is impossible. So I think the best kind of way of looking at it is that we have to embrace education for context that makes sense. And American values and models do not make sense in rural Africa. It's a foolishness and an arrogance that doesn't work.
I love it. Well, yeah, Charlotte, I agree. And now that we've bashed America enough, let's move on to another country. But I fully agree. And I think a lot of us through TV and through commercialization and stuff, we're trying to sell the American dream and democracy for all and, land of opportunity to everyone. And it sure isn't the case even in America. But let's move on to staff. And I think you kind of climbed on, you opened a little door there, is having the right type of teacher do the right sort of job. And I've always said the worst person to go to for marriage advice and sex education is a celibate priest. Yet they offer all those types of courses, and it's almost like a teacher who has never run a job, their own job, trying to teach entrepreneurship and economics and that, because they're teaching it purely from a textbook, purely from an academic point of view, and they teach to pass the exam. They don't teach to educate. And I think that is bad. How bad is the teaching that you've seen, Steve, around Africa?
It's a very interesting question, because just prior to independence in Zimbabwe, the education system underwent a massive transformation. And two Catholic nuns worked with some of their people from the education system and introduced the philosophy of Paulo Freire, is a Brazilian philosopher, educator, which really was an experimental model of getting people that are learning to learn through dialogue and problem solving. It was heavily problem solving orientated, so that it made you think critically. It made you think as to what alternatives and possibilities exist out there to help you solve your problems in life. And that was introduced into the Zimbabwean curriculum just prior to 1980, and has subsequently really matured in that space. And so in the schools I visited there, the teachers were outstanding, because they were using that, and the children weren't just putting up their hands in row to like, what is 1 and 1, 2, okay. you could see that they were thinking bigger issues through. Okay. And then going into schools in some of the other Southern African countries, here in South Africa, okay, the teachers often don't know or don't have the skills to be able to use that system of teaching. It's rather, I'm going to tell you what it is, and you're going to accept it as fact, and that'll be the truth from here on, and you better remember it, okay? Otherwise, you're in trouble. And that to me has been very unfortunate, and that's what I saw in the schools in Alexandra and Tembisa. The other point is that you even if you are the best teacher, and if you've got 70 kids in a classroom that is like a little tin hut with absolutely hot as Hades in summer, cold in winter, you're never really going to get through to those children in the deepest sense, okay, even if you had a lot more teachers. What I did find with the teachers, though, here in South Africa, their passion for teaching and their commitment was massive, but the system just was so overwhelming that they couldn't overcome it, okay. In the one school that I was working in, Tembisa, to add to the woes of the whole thing, frequently in the 2 years that I worked with them, thieves would come in at night and steal all the copper piping in the ablutions, steal the computers, steal the chairs, steal the desks. It was pillage, okay. And it was just like so tragic to see these kids who were suffering badly anyway. And I think the essence of having good teachers rests in having good training for teachers. So in Zimbabwe, they again, like in Rwanda, they put a lot of emphasis on teacher training colleges, which is the equivalent of a trade school apprenticeship. It has a very, very similar kind of process in it. And those training colleges are still very viable in Zimbabwe, less so in Botswana, more so in Namibia, and to a lesser degree in South Africa, because they want people to come to teach from an educated university degree background. So I think a lot more emphasis and attention needs to be paid to that exact issue that we have. We're never really going to get ahead of the curve if we are working with teachers who are on the back foot all the time.
Yeah, I think that's good. Yeah, one of the sad things is a lot of South African teachers training colleges were just closed down. I went to visit the local one here in Cape Town a while ago, and it's this beautiful building that has got acres and acres of property, and it's just filled with echoes of the past. And it's used by a couple of admin staff and the occasional kind of event that happens. So it is sad, but I think there are places that do education. And just to even out the scales here, there are great schools. There are great schools everywhere, and there are excellent teachers. And there are teachers that, we all have a teacher that we will remember. Mrs. McCool, is a name that I recall from like 40 something odd years ago. And absolutely amazing people who have had a massive defining moment impact in your life. But unfortunately, the majority that we see in staff at schools, they've just lost their mojo. And they might have been passionate one day, they might have had enthusiasm for education, but the system is so lumbered with bureaucrats and report filling and meeting political agendas that we're losing the plot. And if you go and speak to a headmaster, and I've done this on a number of occasions, where you want to go introduce an entrepreneurial program into an education, into a school, and you make an appointment with a headmaster, and you get there and you present this whole thing and you pitch your whole program and say it's free, it's been sponsored, we can do this, and the headmaster just sits there and shakes his head and says, you have no idea how hard my life is. I'm getting 150 emails a day with people trying to pitch to get their products into my school. I'm dealing with teachers sleeping with pupils. I'm dealing with teachers sleeping with other teachers. We got rape cases. We got theft. We got people breaking into the school. Now we got issues with the toilet, we got issues with sanitation, and then COVID happened, and COVID destroyed the education. And, you know, I can't speak for the rest of the world, but it separated education in South Africa into two halves, those who were online and those who were lost. And very, very simple. You were either online on a school or you were lost in the school. And again, the majority of kids lost almost an entire year of education, and yet they just got pushed through because, shame of circumstances, so we'll get you. And that sets them up for failure, and that gets pushed them down to lower grade subjects and maths lit, which goes there rather. You know, those kids who were able, and kids, it's learners, the learners who were able to, you know, access online education, and they were able to get into asynchronous education, as they called it, with lectures and Zoom calls. They were able to at least, you know, rescue some of that year. But it's been an absolute tragedy. And we were just speaking to Gina earlier, who's on this call, and she's looking at, you know, what happens in Natal with post-COVID schooling. And really interesting, you know, and it's like that everywhere around the world, because, yeah, where do we go? How do we recover from that? It's been 2 years of recovery, but people are still trying to get back to the office, get back to school. We're trying to overcome this. So I think the future of education in Africa is, I'm glad we're not doing the rest of the world, because we can just focus on Africa and put our blinkers on for this conversation. But I think Africa has got good examples of stuff that's working. How Cambridge education has been applied across South Africa in places like Zimbabwe and others is absolutely tremendous. I hold Rwanda up. Way up there, their attitude towards education, the way they pay teachers and they look after their staff, and the way they're growing that economy post their issues that they had in '94. They've reinvented the entire country, and together with that, the education, they've got a shared education for Rwandans, by Rwandans, for all Rwandans, and that's not separated anymore. Yet we are still struggling after a much longer period, and it's a sad state here as well as other places. And, you know, we've highlighted a few countries and a few examples. But before we go to questions, Steve, you want closing remarks, and then we'll open up the floor for Q&A. So if you've got a question, you can either type it into the chat box, or you can just put your hand up and we will unmute you and you get to ask us a question. We do not promise that we will be able to answer it, but if we can't, we will definitely comment and get back to you with some information. So prepare your questions. Steve, closing remarks.
Yeah. One of the things I hope people are not going to go away with thinking that I want to go back to traditional cultural practices in total. You know, that's not what I'm getting at. I'm saying we mustn't discount them, that indigenous knowledge is extremely important, etc. What I am trying to put across is that there needs to be a bridging process. If you have two intersecting circles at the center of where they intersect, there needs to be a crossover phase or process or a capability where you can have all of the level of knowledge that you require to be a really good rural citizen, productive, having a real good quality of life and well-being and happiness and everything. And the education system must take you to a point that allows you to either say, I don't want to go into the big world and technology and everything. I want to stay and farm on my little plot in the communal area. Or you can be in this middle section that gives you enough of a foothold, a leg up, through skills-based training, you know, being trained to be a bricklayer, a plumber, a carpenter, roofer, whatever it is. Many skills, trades that one can learn. And then with that, you can then enter into the more scientifically, technically orientated space. Okay. And I see that in Southern Africa, that where there is this massive gap of skill-based tradespeople, they will be filled with those countries that have produced skills-based people through their technical colleges. Okay. And it's happening, and it's happening around us. And so I'm not saying that the futuristic side of things is just pie in the sky. Hopefully some higher level of technology will come where everybody can have a smartphone or a tablet or whatever, and then have internet everywhere and be able to access the kind of AI learning that is going to be coming our way. I just think that by putting all our eggs in the Western basket, in this Eurocentric philosophy of education, which is very individualistic. It's not the nice communal, humanistic side of things which traditional education systems have. I think there's needed to be a blended process that we can have across Africa, where we can, both sides can move across and be fluid according to what your needs are at a particular time in your life. Thank you.
We haven't even touched on all the different, Montessori, CAPS, Cambridge, the IEB, rural farm schools, the technical schools. There's so many different ways. There's lots of means to an end. And one of the things that we've done with the education of my kids is we've explored the right type of education for the type of child. And we've done a pretty okay job, I think. Time will tell, but we're just looking at that, and not to just squeeze everybody through the same education thing and compliance and trying to do that. School almost killed me in more ways than one, and it took me a long time to get over my school and unlearn what I was supposed to learn at school and learn real life. And so I think that's there. So I think any more questions, comments, either just put them in the chat or raise your hand, and we can speak about them.
Bruce,
yeah.
Is there another question?
No, not at the moment.
Okay. Yeah. And I think there's a fallacy that our educators are kind of working with, is that being a rural person, okay, is infra-dig. It's people who live in rural areas are unhappy. They seem to be kind of non kind of educated people, etc. I totally disagree with that. Some of the cleverest people I've ever come across are in deep rural areas, where I just get totally amazed at the collective intellectual capability of a community. Unbelievable. Okay. And that's how they work, with their khotlas and their meetings that they have, etc., with the collective decision making and everything that we seem to have lost in our drive for competitiveness and individualistic kind of pursuits. The idea that the rural is bad and the urban is good needs to be debunked. It absolutely needs to be debunked. I know a lot of people who absolutely prefer to live with their rural lifestyle, traditional kind of customs and everything like that, and maybe do have a few kind of sideline jobs here and there that or depend on some income coming from some other outside source. But that really needs to be thrown out the window. Absolutely.
I agree. I think there's lots to hold. Life has been marketed away from where we should be, and I think the whole urbanization model is a sad one, because it's ruining Africa as well as many other places around the world. So we haven't even touched on technology. We haven't even touched on AI, and I want to bring AI back into the fold for a future thing. If you're interested in reading the latest AI trends, then there's a book, A Hitchhiker's Guide to AI by Arthur Goldstuck. It's been launched recently. They're launching it in Cape Town at the waterfront tonight. Excellent book. It'll give you a well-rounded thing. If you've got a fear of computers or a fear of AI, where you don't know what AI is, there's a lot there in that book, and it unpacks all the stuff in simplicity. He's got chapters marked. These are for novice people. These are for mediocre, and these are for the techie. So he's got these little symbols in there. If you're not one of those, you can just bypass all the techie stuff, or you can just go read all the techie stuff. It's well written, well laid out, and it's a great book. But we will be speaking a lot about AI. I'm putting together a program which I'm teaching up in Joburg the beginning of February on using artificial intelligence in the form of the Amazon Dot and Alexa as a class companion into schools. And we're going to go and start rolling that one out hopefully soon, and looking at how to do really cheap AI stuff. For 1,000 Rand, you can get AI permanently in your classroom, and I'm going to be speaking to Amazon to reduce that, to see what we can do and seeing how we can get the kids to be curious about technology without having to be technologically literate. And you don't have to go coding, you can just speak to it. All these things are voice activated, and I think the future is here, but people have been robbed of the future through poor education. So I just want to, thank you, Charlotte, for your contribution. Thank you, Steve, for the prep work. And I know you had a whole slide deck and everything there, but I think we've been able to dispel quite a lot of wisdom out of you, and probably end up with more questions than we had before, which is always a good outcome of anything like this. We're not here to spoon feed you education, but we're here to rattle your cage, and to do all that information. If anybody is listening to this now on the recorded have any questions, then please direct it to us. You can find us as sustainablestrategies.africa. Go and find us there, or you can email me or Steve. You can find us on LinkedIn, Steve Johnson or Bruce Wade. And if you got any hard questions, then you can just send them to Charlotte Kemp, and you can find her online as well. So we kind of looked a little bit in recap. We've looked at the skills versus qualifications, urban skills, relevant skills, technical skills, as opposed to the qualifications, the academic qualifications, which is best, which is better than the other, which is more relevant to the person where they're at. That's an interesting stuff. We looked at farming versus coding. What does the future look like? If you don't know how to farm, you better know how to code. If you don't know how to code, you better know how to farm. Otherwise, you're going to be illiterate in the future of the world, which is quite interesting. It's interesting. All of a sudden, the world turned to farming, and 80% of the world became illiterate. It's actually a really interesting conversation. And we looked at the private schooling versus government schooling, the pros and cons of that, financially, outcome-based, touched on that as well. And there's some really good government schools, but there's also some really bad private schools. So either way, I think that's an ongoing conversation. We looked at bad teachers, overworked headmasters, but yet not painting everybody with the same brush to say all teachers are bad. There are some excellent, passionate, absolutely extraordinary teachers that are impacting lives for hundreds of years. And we take our hats and we salute you, teachers, and we thank you. But there are some other teachers that see it as a right to earn an income because I, as a teacher, and they are doing a piss poor job and making more problems than anything else. And we do not salute you. We ask you to upskill and get right like any other job. And we also looked at overworked headmasters. We understand the workload of being an administrator, headmaster in a broken system filled with education, filled with political agendas, filled with having to conform to many different agendas, pulling you in your different directions, as well as trying to educate and care for your teachers and all the pupils. But yet we find headmasters rising up to do an excellent job and to be shining lights in the midst of this abject confusion that is the education in Africa. But I think just to look at a closing mark, I think education is important. Education is the keystone to a future of an organization. And I do not want parents to blame the teachers or blame the government. You are a parent. You made the kid take responsibility for their future. Do whatever you have to do within your means to get your children the unfair advantage in life. Whatever it takes, seek it out, do that. Do not compromise. Do not take no for an answer. Do not take average as an acceptance. If you want something, go after it. There are amazing free schools. There are amazing education that's out there. We're doing a big thing with Crystal House this year, and schooling is free for 12 years plus 5 years post-school. Free for nothing. You just got to get your children in there if you can to get there. The education is available. Do whatever you can. Do not sit and blame, but take action. That's what Sustainable African Strategies is all about. We want to help empower people to make good decisions and to take the ideas forward. So I want to thank you. I see there was a comment, a chat.
I'm just responding to Sekonele now.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Awesome.
And Sekonele, my point to you is that I totally agree that a lot of that is taught by parents and the community at large, but we can make them more productive. We can create markets for them. They can get more money for their produce. They can build better produce. Collectively, they can package it, and market it differently. They can actually collectively sell it into the Woolworths, etc., as community-based vegetables or whatever it is. So it's just taking all of this another level higher than we are currently sitting at, as we are at the moment. In Zimbabwe, the extension services there were amazing at getting the productivity of rural farmers into another higher level. And it's all to do with the rural development and community development people.
Yeah. That's brilliant. Yeah. And there's some huge success stories that we're working with. So that's absolutely great. Lovely. Our time is past. So once again, thank you for lending us your ears. We will advertise. Now we have your names on our database. We will advertise to you our next webinar and workshops. We're also having events around Africa, which we climb in a topic and we do a deep dive. The workshops will be a little bit longer, but we are going to have regular webinars on various topics throughout the year. All the information is on our website or in an email box coming to you soon. So thank you very much. Thanks again just to Charlotte and to Steve and to Sustainable Africa Strategies for hosting this. We look forward to a future conversations. Happy to chat further offline. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks. Cheers.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.